In the pre-dawn fog of an October morning, a combined German and Austro-Hungarian force launched an assault that would shatter an entire front and push an army to the brink of annihilation. This is the story of Caporetto, a catastrophic Italian defeat that also became the proving ground for a legendary commander. But how did this stunning victory ultimately fail to save the empire that won it? By the autumn of 1917, the Central Powers were racing against time. American entry into the war threatened to tip the scales, while internal exhaustion and hunger gnawed at the home fronts. Yet, the collapse of Russia offered a fleeting opportunity. The sole remaining land threat was Italy, a nation bloodied by 11 brutal, indecisive battles along the Isonzo River. Relieving pressure here was essential. The Austro-Hungarian Emperor, Karl I, was desperate to lead this offensive with his own troops against their historic Italian foe. "My entire army considers the war against Italy our war," he wrote. But his German allies had serious doubts. Berlin viewed Vienna's military as weakened and its political resolve as shaky. A joint operation, commanded by Germans, would ensure victory and keep Austria-Hungary firmly in the fight. Thus, the German 14th Army was formed. A mixed force under General Otto von Below. Among its ranks was a young, ambitious lieutenant whose name would later become synonymous with desert warfare, Erwin Rommel. What followed was a masterclass in infiltration tactics that would rewrite the rules of mountain combat. The plan, codenamed Operation Waffentrue, was audacious. Instead of a traditional broad front assault, elite stormtrooper units would infiltrate Italian lines across a 40-kilometer front near the village of Caporetto. The strategy was described as a clenched fist punching through a barrier, then opening its fingers to spread chaos in the rear. The Central Powers amassed 350,000 men and 2,500 artillery pieces against an Italian force of 250,000 with inferior artillery. But the attackers faced their own crippling shortages of supplies and food. Could they even sustain a major push? The Italians, for their part, were woefully unprepared. Morale was shattered after years of costly, fruitless attacks under the harsh command of General Luigi Cadorna. Defensive preparations were neglected, with Cadorna distracted by political maneuvering in Rome. On the eve of the attack, 2 Austro-Hungarian deserters crossed over and delivered a full warning of the imminent offensive. The Italian High Command, in a fatal blunder, dismissed them. Before sunrise, on October 24, 1917, the storm broke. A short, but devastatingly intense, 4-hour bombardment saturated the Italian positions. The shelling included a sinister innovation, a mixed gas barrage known as Bunchgin. Irritant gases forced soldiers to tear off their masks, only to be met with deadly chemical agents. Through the fog and poison haze, the infantry advanced. Rommel, leading his Württemberg Mountain Battalion, noted the effectiveness of the suppression fire. He wrote that the Italian searchlights tried vainly to pierce the rain, and only a few enemy batteries dared to answer the German guns. The infiltration tactics worked perfectly. Stormtroopers bypassed strongpoints and attacked from the rear and flanks, sowing utter confusion. Italian resistance crumbled with shocking speed. Whole units, finding themselves surrounded and leaderless, surrendered en masse. Lieutenant Carlo Gadda, captured with his men, recorded in his diary the extreme anguish for the fatherland. For many common soldiers, however, surrender brought a grim relief that their war was finally over. The Italian Second Army simply disintegrated into a fleeing, disorganized mob. Command and control evaporated. General Cadorna, learning of the disaster hours later, blamed his own troops for cowardly retreating. He ordered a retreat to the Tagliamento River, but it was too late. The front had been ripped open. In the coming days, a small unit led by Rommel would pull off one of the most audacious feats of the entire battle. Pressing forward aggressively, Rommel's men scaled the strategic heights of Caporetto. From this dominant position, they looked down into the Italian trenches below. Rommel described the scene. His men shouted down to the unsuspecting garrison, who stared up in fright, realizing they were completely trapped. Without firing a shot, Rommel's force captured the entire position. He would later disobey a direct order to retreat, choosing instead to press the attack and capture even more enemy troops. His small unit alone captured 2 entire regiments. The Central Powers' advance became a relentless race. By October 29th, they reached the Tagliamento River. In their panic, Italian engineers blew the bridges prematurely, stranding 2 of their own divisions on the wrong side. The rout continued, with scenes of chaos so profound they would later be immortalized in Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms. The Italian army was not just defeated. It was systematically dismantled. Back in Austria-Hungary, newspapers celebrated the miracle of Caporetto. The government launched a new war bond campaign, buoyed by the triumph. But this euphoria masked a dark reality. The offensive had stretched supply lines to the breaking point. Emaciated soldiers, described as staring vacantly from bloodshot eyes, began looting for food, their discipline fraying. The distrust between German and Austro-Hungarian commands also resurfaced, with some Austrian units even surveilling their allies. For Italy, the shock was existential. The government fell. In desperation, Rome begged Britain and France for help, who reluctantly sent divisions to prop up their faltering ally. One British staff report coldly assessed Italy as an additional burden. The Allies unanimously demanded Cadorna's head, replacing him with the more competent General Armando Diaz. Could this new leadership rally a broken nation on the brink of collapse? The answer came at the Piave River. Here, in mid-November, the Italian army, reinforced by young conscripts and a sliver of national resolve, made its stand. Engineers destroyed the bridges, and the defenders held the high ground. The Central Powers' advance, overextended and exhausted, finally ground to a halt. In just 17 days, they had advanced 150 kilometers and captured nearly 300,000 prisoners. The Battle of Caporetto was a tactical masterpiece. The Italians suffered staggering losses, 40,000 casualties, 290,000 prisoners, and as many as 400,000 deserters. The victors captured immense stockpiles, including over 1 million greatcoats. But it was a Pyrrhic victory. The immense logistical effort starved Austrian cities of food, pushing a weary population closer to revolt. The empire had won its greatest battle, only to accelerate its own internal collapse. For Erwin Rommel, Caporetto was a career-defining moment. He was awarded the Pour le Mérite and promoted to captain. The lessons of speed, infiltration, and audacity he learned here were codified in his book, Infantry Attacks, doctrines he would use 2 decades later, in a new world war. The battle also left a deep scar on Italy, fueling political bitterness and a national myth of a stab in the back that would resonate for years. If you found this deep dive into one of history's most decisive yet paradoxical battles compelling, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to Winds of Thought. Your engagement helps us bring more forgotten chapters of history to light.